What does it take to bring an operation back from something like that, a disaster, like what you're describing? I imagine things are coming back online in silos, maybe even. What is the most difficult thing to bring back up online?
Well, I think the hardest is the employees because when you we'll take the pink shell for instance, that property, 350 employees, and then you have a hurricane that devastates the area. I mean, it was a 1 in 10,000 year storm. I mean, the storm surge was 18 feet. You can imagine 18 feet of water and what that caused, but it's how it changes people's lives, I think, is the hardest. You know, those employees, you're not able to maintain all of your employees. You really can keep a core of them. We were able to maintain a little over 100.
Welcome to Deep Current by Oceans. I'm your host, Kaylor. This show is built for the people who actually run hospitality operations, the leaders that make everything work behind the scenes. Today, I'm joined by Bill Waichulis, president at Boykin Management Company. Welcome to the show, Bill.
Thanks, Kaylor. Pleasure to be here.
So before we get into it, Bill, tell us how you ended up in hospitality. Was it deliberate path? Did the industry kind of pull you in somewhere along the way?
So I grew up in Key Largo, Florida, and I got a job as a bellman, and I would deliver the USA Today's underneath the door, then go to high school, come work second shift, and I'd go home every day, making people happy and with cash in my pocket. And I just fell in love with the hospitality business. So I didn't go to college. At the time, that hotel was operated by Interstate Hotels. I worked for them, I don't know, probably 17, 18 years. And then I've managed all different resorts in Florida, anywhere from Orlando to Clearwater to Captiva Island with them. And then I had an opportunity with Boykin Management to come over and manage one of their properties on Fort Myers Beach called the Pink Shell. And I've been with Boykin now 20 years, and now I run the whole management company. But all started just as a bellman.
Great. That's an excellent path. So tell our listeners about the operation. Give us a sense of scale. How big is the property you have? What are you currently running?
Sure. We're operating one large resort right now. We had at one time over 40 hotels. So we were a publicly traded property, a REIT on the New York Stock Exchange. We sold the REIT and then maintained a handful of properties. Unfortunately, after Hurricane Ian, we lost some of those hotels here in Florida, and we focused all our efforts on our main flagship property, the Pink Shell, which is on Fort Myers Beach. Unfortunately, it was severely damaged by Hurricane Ian, which was 4 years ago in September. And a $75 million insurance claim, but it's fully operational. We have some more development rights that we came out of, that we went through the process. So we focused all our efforts on this property and how we can grow the revenues and tweak the operation to be as successful as possible.
So Bill, tell us, I don't think this is talked about enough. At least I have not heard people mention it as often maybe as I would expect. What does it take to bring an operation back from something like that, a disaster? Like what you're describing. I imagine things are coming back online in silos, maybe even. What is the most difficult thing to bring back up online?
Well, I think the hardest is the employees because when you we'll take the pink shell for instance, that property, 350 employees, and then you have a hurricane that devastates the area. I mean, it was a 1 in 10,000 year storm. I mean, the storm surge was 18 feet. You can imagine 18 feet of water and what that caused, but it's how it changes people's lives, I think, is the hardest. You know, those employees, you're not able to maintain all of your employees. You really could keep a core of them. We were able to maintain a little over 100, and they had to be willing to, you might have had a cook, right? Or a housekeeper. They have to be willing to take wet drywall out, and debris that's on the ground and then clean up to what they're, or, you might have been a bellman and you're now doing drywall cleanup. And So I think it changes your philosophy from, trying to make memories with guests to trying to recover the asset as fast as possible so you can start getting back to operations. And it's how do you get income coming in to be able to stay afloat. And for us, we had one building that was not heavily damaged, and we brought about 70 FEMA families. And the FEMA families are displaced people that are lost their homes, and the government's paying for their housing, but they didn't care about not having an elevator. They didn't care about not having a pool. They just needed somewhere with air conditioning and be able to sleep. So were able to supplement income while we got the other buildings back online. But to answer your question, I think the hardest is just how it affects people's lives. um I got this tattoo right after the storm, and if you play Texas Hold'em, you know, a 7 at 2 or like worst hand you could be dealt, right? Well, Ian was the worst hand we could be dealt. Doesn't mean you lose, right? It's how you play the hand. And that's what we took as an attitude of how do you, we dealt a horrible hand. How do we make the best out of it? And that's, kind of where we took what our guest comments were. Our biggest guest complaint at the Pink Show, not having hot tubs. Yeah. Tough challenge to have, not having hot tubs at the resort. So we fixed that. We put 2 in. We redid different things that the guests made comments about, and made the resort even better. And that's what we're kind of seeing now that we're 4 years past that storm. But the toughest is how it affects people's lives.
I think that's a very unique experience as a leader in hospitality. Also, one that, I mean, clearly you wouldn't wish upon many people. So it speaks volumes about your resilience, but at the same time, it's just fascinating how you can still come back from something so devastating.
And I will say too that you learn. Every year we learn more. And we have a hurricane plan, and most resorts that are in hurricane areas have a hurricane plan. But we're literally modifying that hurricane plan every year with something new that we potentially learn. Now with AI, we put our hurricane plan into AI, and it came back with recommendations. And the things I highly recommend, but tweak that plan every year that you can, because there's things that you learn. Little things like we allowed our employees to stay at the resort because they're safe buildings, but they had their cars on the property. Well, when you get the flooding, those cars become the battling rams that hit the transformers and your backflows, and it causes more damage. So now we have a policy of no vehicles are on the property at all. We get everything off the ground level no matter what. We haul all of our equipment, tractors, Kubotas, all those the equipment off island. That way, after the storm, we got the tractors to be able to help recover. Little things that you learn, unfortunately, through experience.
Right. During from what you just said, there were two things that you brushed over very quickly, and I actually want to come back to them in a little bit. One of them being guest experience, how you want to be involved with the guest experience as opposed to doing collateral damage control and all of that. That is one important thing. And then you brought up AI. I want to actually ask you more about how you leverage it for your operation today. Before we do that, let me pivot very quickly because I want to understand what a typical week looks like for you. Not the role description, but what goes on day to day in real life.
Well, I mean, it changes every day. If you're in this business and your day that you say you're going to accomplish this today happens, that's very unusual. Typically, my day is I'm all over the place with you got your goals that you want to set for the week. It's hard to set the goals for the day because you never know what's going to happen. With an associate that you need to take care of, or a guest that might need a little bit more attention, or a problem that happens mechanically at the resort. So my typical day is we follow the Rockefeller habits. I don't know if you're familiar with those, Kaylor, but it's all about J.D. Rockefeller. Vern Harnish wrote the book. But one of the theories is like you do your stand up in the morning, but you don't do your stand up at we don't do our stand up at 8 o'clock. We do our stand up at 8:08. And there's a reason, because if you start at 8, typically you'll have that employee or manager that, comes in 3 minutes or 4 minutes late, disrupts the meeting. But if you say it's 8:08, 98% show up right at 8 anyways. And you get 8 minutes of them networking and connecting either on a personal level or a business level, for those 8 minutes. And the person that's potentially always at the right at being late is on time. So that's one of the habits we have, and we start our stand-ups at 8:08 every morning, kind of talk about what's going to happen for the day, and then we disperse for that. It's a stand-up 15-20 minutes, and we also have a staff meeting every week, and then we have also a monthly meeting, and then we have a quarterly meeting. So it's kind of like it's the rhythm. If you almost look at it as music, you have dot 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 your daily meetings, week your monthly meeting, your quarterly meeting, and that's for the most part how the day starts off. And from there, it's whatever it takes to make sure that the guests are being taken care of and the employees are being taken care of.
But are you then spending more time in front of a computer or at the facilities? And again, I know this can vary from day to day as you're describing, but if you had to tell me like what
Sure.
you're looking at mostly on a day-to-day basis, maybe 50-50, 60-40, what does that look like?
I'd say it's 50-50 for me. 50 being in the office, 50 being out and about on the resort. The Pink Shell is 11-acre property, so it's pretty significant. So 50% out and about, talking with associates, talking with the guests. If you're not talking to your guests, you're missing a great opportunity, because they're going to tell you what they love about your resort or your hotel, and they're also going to tell you what you need to change. And if you're not listening to them and waiting for them to do the comment cards, only, I get those all the time. I never fill them out, but talking with people, you're going to get that quick, immediate feedback. My day is 50-50, and that might swing one way or another based on a challenge, but for the most part, it's 50.
And that 50 that is in front of a computer, let's say the boring part, what is that typically? Is it responding to emails? Is it RFPs? Is it looking at reports? What's driving most of that time?
It's mainly looking at financials, guest comment. We use a company called Revenate, looking at those comment cards, they're obviously digital, reviewing those, reviewing financials, and then also just responding to emails that, just pretty much the day-to-day communication that potentially you may have. But that's usually the 50% in the office. And also, if you have to have, private meetings with either some of my team members, I would consider that in the 50%.
Gotcha. So tell me what part of your operation now that seems like you guys are in a good place, things are stable, right? So today, what's the part of your operation that you're very happy with, that your team has figured out?
Well, I think our we score off of net promoter score. For those that don't know what net promoter score is, it's scale of 1 to 10, right? So 10 being fantastic, 1 being god awful. You nines and tens are positive, sevens and eights are zeros. 0 through 6 is a negative. So our net promoter score right now is a 78. Ritz Carlton, you would say is the high standard of our industry. They typically run around 76 to 78. So we're at that level. So I would say we're very proud to have a net promoter score with our guests of being very high. And, I think we really focus on that. If you asked any of our employees, what's your job? From the room attendant to one of our cooks or front desk agents. My job is here to make memories. Doesn't matter if you're behind the scenes or in front of the scenes, but you're making a memory. So, if you're cleaning the dishes, you're making memories, because if those dishes aren't clean, it's going to be a bad memory. And we want obviously good memories. So it's getting that philosophy of the team to get to that high scores. So everybody is kind of not working, like you mentioned before, in silos. If you get everybody in silos, it's not good. I mean, you need everybody with the same goal in mind, which is, how do I make a memory for this guest, and so they have a fantastic time.
That does bring me to a question though. It's clearly impossible for you to be everywhere at once. And you have to rely on I guess, either systems or things that happen on a day to day so that you know whether things are running properly and the guest experience is good, right? That net promoter score that you're trying to maintain, you need to have some kind of data to make decisions upon to make sure that it remains high. So what's giving you this information? What's feeding you, and how quickly is it happening? If a problem does show up, how quickly can you tell so that you can fix it?
Yeah, I think, I mean, if you're in tune with your guests, you're going to hear it pretty quickly. We use different systems. We use Zingle, which is, for texting and communicating with the guests while they're here at the resort. If we've got any specials, if they're, if they arrived early and their room's ready, we can Zingle them, we can text them. So that's usually one source of communication. The Revenate, the comment cards, obviously that's after the guest has left. So it's, following up on those. We're also watching, if you're not watching your social media side, I mean, Google, your reviews on Expedia, TripAdvisor. It's funny how if you went back, 15 years ago, before you'd have a guest stay and they would go tell, the theory was they'd go tell 10 people about their stay being good or bad. Now they could put it on Google and they tell 100,000 people in a matter of seconds. We found it so important to focus in on that is going to from a financial standpoint with our employees. Years ago, we used to run ads in New York Times or um, Chicago Tribune, and on those ads, expensive $3,000 to $5,000. We now incentivize our employees to encourage guests to go on and put a review, and when in conversation.
So, Bill, there's one thing I hear consistently from hospitality operators, and that is that systems never really connect among each other. Every vendor promises integration. Most properties are still reconciling things manually. You've already mentioned that you use a couple of solutions, but I'm curious, is that your reality now, or do you feel you've gotten past that integration piece?
I'd say we're partially there. I would say I'm still in the boat with the majority, which is our integration isn't great. So we use a property management system called Maestro, and it's integrated with a point of sale system called Silverware. So they talk very well together. Um, and then you're interlinked with your TV system, so you can do the video checkout. We're integrated with Revenate, so we can get our comment card scores. But you got still a lot of platforms where you don't have data coming in and being able to analyze it. So I think we're in the early stages of having great data through our property management system. It's how do you get that data and be able to analyze it very quickly. And we're looking at different vendors, and we're in the early stages of how do you get AI to be able to do that for you, take all this great data that you have in your property management system and give you analyze it within seconds and give you the results. And that's where we are right now as a company. We'll try to figure that out. I think we're using Copilot as our AI, so it's how do we get that data into the Copilot and then be able to analyze it from there. Obviously you want to have it isolated to where it's within your AI, so it's not out there, because you obviously got financial and data that you don't want out to the world. But I think that's the next stage for us in our.
You said you're getting there, but it's not perfect.
No.
What is not perfect? What is missing from where you would like it to be?
Well, you still got to go to several different, if you want to look at, you got to go to, to your Revenate website to look at your Revenate scores. You got to use your Revenate to also look at your, the Google, the Expedia, and all those. I have to go to my, where we hold our financial statement for the dailies, and it's a whole nother, Excel platform that you're looking at that data. So you're looking at all these different platforms, but to be able to integrate it into one to where you could have it as a dashboard right on your computer, I think is the next phase in our industry. And I think AI will eventually get us there. I think it's just working through the process, because we're all learning. AI is evolving so fast. It's amazing. But I think that's the next evolution for us. And I think even from a marketing standpoint, we're rebuilding our website right now to be more AI compliant, to we're better Because we're getting calls. We do about 50% by web and 50% by phone, which is high. I mean, having that much phone, but we're getting callers that say, I went into, Chat GPT and put, I want a resort on a Florida beach, give me a recommendation. And it listed you. So, it's becoming, and then the next phase will be, go ahead and just book it for me. And that's the next phase. And I think that's where eventually we're going to get to. But right now we're getting people, finding us through the AI.
So where are you getting that data? That 50% is from your website, 50% is from calls, I presume.
Sure. So that's from our property management system through Maestro. So it's able, and it's also, and then we other have the other platform which we use as Revenue, which is, we record we have our own call center. We take all our phone reservations ourselves. I could tell you if my conversion on my phone is 52%, which is very high. But 1% a year, if you can move that needle, 1% is $150,000. So, those are the numbers that you need to know in this industry, that you move that needle 1%, your revenue just grew 150,000. So, making sure your agents have visited your property, they're well trained, they're following the correct scripting. Those are I think very key, and those are things that that we watch. Advanced deposits, what do you have sitting in the advanced deposits, which is a good indicator what you have on the books for the future, but it's also you're getting interest on those advanced deposits, which it could be a revenue source for you.
So to me, it's clear that you understand there are many sources of data that are relevant to you making decisions, but somehow not all of them are talking among each other. And that's where you might be losing potentially revenue, potentially customer experience, good quality decision making.
Yeah, and I think, or you're missing it, or it's taking you 2, 3, 4 times the amount of time to be able to do all of the work. So, if you're getting in the hospitality business, you already know you're working a lot more than 40 hours a week. You're at 60, 70 hours a week. And, could we be more efficient if everything was integrated? Probably.
Does that affect you when something unexpected happens during the operation, like a system goes down or a key member of the team calls sick or a booking spike hits? Do you figure those things out in real time? Is it a quick response or is there a delay that ultimately impacts your day to day?
Yeah, I think for me personally, I look to have people that are smarter than me that work underneath me. So I will say for me, it doesn't affect me as much because they're handling it. I mean, they're a great team, um, and they work well together. So for me, it doesn't personally affect me as much. If it gets to me, how do I support them and help them and figure out the challenge? But most of my executive team is kind of handling those challenges as they happen, and I have faith in them that they will.
Got it. So I want to get really candid here for a second with something that is related to that, and something that it's clear to me you're already noticing and know it's there, but are still kind of figuring out what direction to take. From what I've read, 15 to 20% of additional revenue could be captured by hotels that is not being captured. Of course, you're trying to capture the revenue from the booking, but you're also trying to capture the revenue from upsell and from the F&B and from experiences within the premises and all of that. So part of being able to capture that revenue, I believe, has to do with the pre-arrival window, which I something I find fascinating. You have the guest booking. So you get their email, you have maybe 7 days before they're actually at the hotel. Most operators I'm talking to are not leveraging that window in any way. And there's value to be captured there, in my opinion. So do you have pre-arrival communication right now? How are you dealing with this?
So we're fortunate that we have our own call center, as I mentioned before, and we also have an on-site concierge. We are physically calling every guest. Our goal is at least 2 weeks out, and we're calling everybody, making the voice touch. And even if you're getting their voicemail, you're just leaving a voicemail. But we're also sending them the pre-arrival email to where they can actually book things ahead of time too. Being a day bed, a cheeky hut on the beach. They could even book. We do dinners on the beach, which are real popular with the couples at sunset. So you can book that in advance. Or if it's a special occasion that you want the room decorated or an amenity in the room, that's in a pre-arrival email. But it's also, so we're doing it by phone, and then we're also sending you 2 emails before you arrive to where you can book those things pre-arrival. And since we've started those things, I think it's been very successful for us. One of our other measurements is out of pocket spend. I mean, Disney is the master of out of pocket spend. They have got it down to a science of getting every penny out of your pocket. And that's our goal, is literally, making sure a guest is educated enough to where they understand, if they're coming to the pink shell, they don't really need a car. Once they get here, everything's available to them, and then it's how do you get them to all your restaurants, and how do you get the kids to all the activities, and a fishing charter or on a wave runner or bike rental. I mean, all of those things are just part of the communication that a guest, if they know about it, then they potentially can plan for it, versus when they start leaving your resort, and your out of pocket spend is going to go down.
100%. So you got a great system. I love that you're doing that. I love that you're reaching out to these customers beforehand. It still sounds relatively manual. Is that very time consuming to do? Have you figured out a way to maximize efficiency on that window?
Well, I will say with the pre-arrival email, that's pretty integrated, that system. So once the guest clicks on it, and they make their reservation, and it automatically charges them for whatever activity they want. That is pretty automated. So so an example would be, say they booked the Cheeky Hut. So they'll book it, it reserves it automatically, and it charges them for it. And that's all automated, which makes life easy. In the company that we work with, they get a small percentage out of it for that platform, but it makes us more profitable in the fact that we're getting the sale ahead of time, and the reservation done, versus trying to make sure that when they get here, we've all experienced it, Taylor. When you get to a resort, it's like, what are we going to do? Well, if you're already planned that a week to 2 weeks in advance, that you kind of got things set, it makes life a lot easier for the guest, a lot less stressful, but it's also better for the resort because you're getting the out of pocket spend.
On that note, kind of a nice segue into this one, but tell me about returning guests. Another lever, I believe that should be massive for hotels. Some operations don't track who your best guests are, what they prefer, when they last visited. Do you know this information, or does each visit kind of stay on its own?
So our repeat is 33%, which is very high for a resort. I think typical resorts in the 15 to 18%. Um, we're a lot higher. I think that goes again to our NPS score. But yeah, that's one of our metrics that we watch is the repeat. Having that base of business. The pink, and that's a good example. The pink shell does not carry a brand. I mean, we're our own brand. And the property runs very high occupancies, high ADR, um, but it doesn't need Marriott or Hilton, Four Seasons on the front of the building to bring, 'cause they're not going to bring any more occupancy for us. So, I think that's where it's so important for resorts or hotels to know what your repeat is and be able to maintain that number or grow it. And if you don't know it, you should.
100%. And again, on that note, you just mentioned you're only basically managing one location. I still suspect because of the scale, there are still many things that you're trying to control simultaneously. Some of those data points, like this one, is very important, right? The returning guests. But with the performance dips, occupancy, RevPAR, guest satisfaction, even this one, how quickly does it show up in a way that you can act on? Or do you have to wait for a weekly or monthly report? How are you acting upon that information?
I would say we're looking at it. Well, it's hard to react to some of it. You're not reacting to it daily because you're kind of looking at, take guest comments. You might get one guest comment about they liked it, or let's say they don't like it, but then you get 20 comments that loved it. So it's, making a decision daily is really difficult to do versus taking, all right, this is a month of comments or 2 months or a quarter of comments and then saying, all right, well, you need to, all right, we got a lot of comments about whatever, the pillows. So we're going to look at changing the pillow out. I mean, you're not going to make that decision based off of on a daily basis, but we'll put more data. So I think some of it you're looking at it more long term versus the short term data. I think out of pocket spend for us, we look at it on a daily basis. So that's kind of immediate. Looking at last night's out of pocket spend, making sure that all right, what are we doing? Are we getting based on the occupancy? Are we getting out of pocket spend daily? And then making more of your bigger decisions on changing things more with longer term data.
Got it.
And
Great.
I think you gave some very good points, but you know your ENPS is another one that we track, which is your employee NPS
Mm.
score. And we do that on a quarterly basis because I could tell you, if your employees are not happy, there is no way they're going to make your guests happy. So they're just as important as the guests. So making sure that you're listening to them, that you're reacting to them. I mean, I think that's just as important as your guest satisfaction.
I believe the churn in the industry is something like 70 to 80% is really, really high, particularly in hospitality. The attrition is a bit of a problem. So I'm always interested when I also hear that you are interested in culture, the EMPS piece. Absolutely love it. So how long have you been tracking that for, and how do you factor that into your day to day decision? Not day to day. Let's change then the month to month decision making.
Sure. Um, so on the employee standpoint, we do a quarterly check with them. Once a year, we do. I should say twice a year. Every 6 months, we do a big, whether it's 25 questions, versus the quarterly, which is only 3 or 4 questions, just a quick check in with them. The 6 month, our goal is to be certified in a great place to work, and to that you have to reach a score. We've done it the last 5 years. We've hit great work place to work. So that's kind of one of our goals annually is to make sure we're meeting that criteria. And then it's taking those, when you do the larger report, the 25 questions, it's, you break them down by department and their comments, and then human resources is doing, sessions with them that, it's the good, the bad, and the ugly. I mean, but it's communicating what are their concerns and then setting action plans to fix it. But I think it's first is getting that feedback from them. And then, we have employees that are only Spanish speaking or Creole speaking with the Haitian community. So it's having those also your surveys in different languages, so you're able to get their feedback. So I think but we're looking at it on a 6 month deep dive, and then on a quarterly just a temperature check.
Got it. So employee satisfaction, definitely one of those overlooked aspects of hospitality. The other one I've seen, there's a gap between what the operators know that is happening versus what goes on in real life is food and beverage. F&B operations are big of a hurdle for many, especially because of that. What you can actually see in real time versus what goes on day to day. So how do you personally manage inventory and ordering right now? Is there a system? Is it
Sure.
largely the chef's judgment?
We use the Marriott platform, which is Avendra. We use that Avendra for our ordering. It obviously helps in getting competitive pricing. And if you're going to Avendra, you're getting the best pricing because of the bulk ordering. And then obviously there's benefits if you're getting over, I forget what is 90%. Then there's cost scales that you start benefiting from. So we use Avendra. I think it's a very good platform. We've been using it, I think, for 15 years now. So, but that's what we use for our ordering. And then the things that we're not ordering on Avendra are kind of the local stuff. We take pride in the local fish and shrimp, which you're not going to be able to get on Avendra. So, we're getting that here locally.
Got it. Great. Well, What about staffing and scheduling? Because this is another one that I keep hearing is one of the biggest time sinks for managers, for operators, presidents in hospitality. So, how does your team handle scheduling and shift coverage? Is it systematized? Is it a lot of phone calls and texts? What is it like?
So we use a platform called Beekeeper, which is kind of an app for communication with employees. I will say mainly in the food and beverage department, you'll see where they want to trade shifts or change shifts. If you're trying to do that as the manager, you would never be able to keep up with it. So they're using Beekeeper to communicate and trade those shifts. You know, we use a scheduling platform through ADP scheduling, so it works pretty seamlessly on that aspect. You know, but kind of for the employee to when they got to make changes, we kind of give that to them to empower to make those changes on their own and cover the shift. If they can't, then they're really required to be here. It's all about making memories.
Absolutely. Now, while we've been talking, I think you probably brought up 5 to 6 different tools. How do you manage them all constantly to make sure that you're not missing anything?
That's the challenge in our industry is that there's no one system that brings all those into one. So no, I mean that's the challenge in hospitality is that you have to manage each one somewhat separately. And it makes it a challenge. So I think there's always an opportunity for some software writer to be able to commingle all these things. We haven't found that solution yet.
Well, on that note, I think it's reasonable. It stands to reason that you would expect tools to have a niche and maybe for a property manager to only need that specific solution. But out of everything that you're using, is there like a particular mix or set where you go, it doesn't make sense that these things are separate? Most hospitality operators would need them as a single solution. Do you feel like that any time?
Well, I think like you have your peer report, which is your staffing based on off of your revenues. So you've got that report, and you got your daily comment cards that are coming in, then you have your financial performance that's happening on a daily basis. And those are all on different platforms. What's happening on your call center, what's the conversion for that day, how many calls came in. I think all of that is on separate platforms, and you have different managers managing each of those different platforms, but there's no one integrated system that's doing it all.
Got it. So, I would love to ask you more about that. I'm aware that we're starting to run out of time. So, let me move into more of a forward view of both your operation and the industry as a whole. If you could fix one thing about the industry today that you believe is a problem in general for people like you, peers, right? What would it be?
I think it's educating the kids that are coming out of high school. I think hospitality is a great opportunity. If you're an extrovert or an introvert, you can work in the hospitality business because there's jobs that are behind the scenes and there's jobs in front of the scenes. I think we do not a great job of recruitment and educating that it is a field that you can be very successful in and rewarding personally and really enjoy it. So I think that's I would say would love to see something fixed on that aspect. I think you're starting to see cooking happening in the high schools where they're learning how to cook and and do esthetician and hair. But I think that there's always more opportunity. I think that we miss out on, and I think that's in Florida. It's the biggest employment is hospitality, and it's the driver for us. But I think there's a gap on the kids coming in. I think also there's the philosophy that you got to go to college, but in the hotel industry, you don't necessarily need to go to college to be successful. So it's educating, I think, on that aspect. That would be my big one to change, and that I would look at.
Bill, when we first met, actually outside of this conversation that we're having now, and we were discussing, you brought up something related to wages that you're particularly in front of recently that was increasingly a concern or a topic of consideration. Can you tell me more about that?
Sure. So a few years back, Florida put on the ballot increasing the minimum wage. Well, you know, I mean, who doesn't want to get paid more, right? So it passed. So, and it was it's a staged process. And I think the last stage of it is actually this year, September of this year. The minimum wage goes to $15, and the minimum wage for tipped employees goes to 11.98. On food and beverage, if at 11.98, as a business, you're starting to say, all right, well, I gotta staff less because I can't afford to have them at 11.98 and have them do more tables. Well, it's kind of not the way you're going to make memories, because you're going to overwhelm the staff and stress them out. And I think that was the challenge that people didn't think through was going to happen when everything was voted on. So we changed the process to where we do our food and beverage servers and bartenders to $1 an hour. They're commission based, and we went to an automatic gratuity at the resort. So everything is 18% automatic. They're making anywhere between 45 and $65 an hour on that basis. And that system works, obviously, as long as they're getting well over the tipped amount, which they, they are, and they're making very good money at it. But by going to that process, you combat the challenge of the high minimum wage. And let me also preface this also by going from the dollar an hour versus the 11.98, that savings, we took that savings and put it into the bussers, the hostess, and the cooks. We didn't take that and say, oh, well, the company's going to save that money. We took that money and we've paid those positions more in order to, because usually it's a challenge to recruit those positions and putting them at a higher scale of a competitive wage. And then our employees, the servers and the bartenders, are making because it's unfortunately, if you kept on the process of doing the 11.98, you're only going to staff less, and you're going to cause more guest complaints, and you're going to stress your employees out by giving them more tables. And I think it's as good. We found out about this process through the Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association, and they did a whole seminar on it, and we drank the Kool-Aid. And then, after Ian, it was a great opportunity for us with the resort being closed and then reopening. We went through that process of that change, and it's been successful. We see less turnover because of it, because they're making more money, and they're also working less hours, and they're able to not have as many tables and then they're also upselling. If somebody orders that Caesar, they're upselling, do you want shrimp and chicken on that? By the way, the shrimp comes right from that shrimping boat that you see right out there in the Gulf, and it's upselling, which is then spinning back to the out-of-pocket spend and that whole process. So, it was a way to combat it for the future, and it's been very successful for us.
That's a fascinating outcome. So it sounds like you're generally happy with that decision that you made. What is other than that? What is another decision that either you or somebody in your leadership team has made within the past year or two that you are very happy with and wouldn't take back? And then I also want you to tell me if there's anything you would change, anything that you guys have done that you would take back or that you did take back because it didn't quite work.
I think, one of the things that, I think I would say that we've done well is looking at what the guests are saying. I'll give you an example. Our biggest guest complaint before the hot tub was people didn't like paying for chairs and umbrellas on the beach. So we worked that as a packaged into the room rate. That the chairs and umbrellas are just, we include them into the room rate. And then there was the next guest complaint was, you didn't have a hot tub at the resort. And Kayla, I tell you, I am surprised because in September it is awfully hot, and those hot tubs are full, but everybody wants a hot tub. So we put two in. So I'd say that what we've done right is focused on what the guests are saying and reacting on it, taking that long-term feedback and making long-term decisions to
I love the example of the chairs, Bill. The way those decisions are made are exactly why data is important. Do you have a rough ballpark of how much that represents in revenue, for example, that is captured now that you have the ability to do that?
Yeah, so on the packaging, well, I'll also say, I can give you another example too. Breakfast, we include breakfast, and it's not like just a continental breakfast. It's full blown breakfast. We have gentlemen that are making omelets. It's full blown breakfast, and it's included. But we originally did it as only two, and we got a guest would say, well, I have 8 people in my room. We have rooms that can hold up to 8 people, the 2 bedroom, about 1,500 square feet units. Um, Now we've changed our process to where when you make that reservation and you put how many people, it calculates out the rate based on the people's. The breakfast is included with the room rate. The chairs on the beach are included with that. And I will say it's more profitable because you're charging for it up front within the room rate, but it's making sure that you're clearly educating the guests that these things are included, because if your competitor is not including those things, they're obviously going to look less expensive and potentially a better decision. But if you got it up in the front to where people see that, breakfast, a full breakfast is included, the chairs and umbrellas are included. This is great. Well, this is I'm booking here. And then you've got that, you're automatically getting that out of pocket spend.
Right. And the competitive edge that you're presenting yourself as having this additional capabilities or this additional benefits for the customers. So yeah,
Like the pink shell, you got to have your differentiators. The pink shell, all of the rooms overlook the beach. So we right on the front of the website, if you don't get a beach view, your room's free. So, we'll never have to do that because everything overlooks the beach, but it's a big differentiator than other resorts because you have that city view and you're looking at a parking lot, or the nature view and you're looking at a tree. We've all these different room types, but every room for us, from the least expensive to the most expensive, have a beach view. And it's just making sure that you're getting that out front and differentiating your resort versus the others.
and that goes back to listening to your customers and understanding what they value and everything that you brought out so far. So, Bill, there is a bit of a lightning round coming up. Before I move into it, I want to ask you one last question. From your expertise, for an independent operator who's thinking about modernizing part of their operation in any way, shape, or form, what would you recommend they do? Where should they start?
Go look at your competitors. Some of your best decisions will be is taking those ideas that that's already put in place. Yeah, I'll give you an example. I went. It's the Marriott in Orlando. They had these towel. It's called Towel Tracker, and we used to use a little piece of paper, and you're getting 4 towels, and then those tickets went up to the front desk, and very easy-ish. Now we have these towel tracker units. The guest uses their wristband, which is their room key. They hit that. They take as many towels as they want out. Each towel has an RFID chip in it. And then when they return it, it clocks them back in. And if they don't return them, they get charged for them. Automated. But that was me going to the Marriott and getting that idea from. Disney restaurant that I went to used 3D viewers for their desserts. And I'm like, well, they're missing this. This should be a kids menu. So our kids menu is a 3D viewer. How cool is that? And it's a memory. So my advice is go stay at these other that you see as your competition. Simon Sinek says it well. It's the infinite game. You're always going to be playing the game against your competitors. It's so go there and see what they're doing, and maybe you'll get an idea, and that's even a better idea. And that's where I would go first and find who you want to be and come up with better ideas than they are.
I think that's amazing advice. I think you've done two things very well in our conversation. One of them, obviously, showcasing your expertise. The other one being making me want to actually check out the pink shell next time I'm in Florida. That's definitely going to have to be a most check for me. But
What
Bill,
you
so
based, Taylor?
I'm in Costa Rica.
Costa,
Costa Rica. Well, we're big in hospitality as well,
we're in Costa Rica.
down by San Jose near the airport.
Oh, okay. Well, Arenal is one of my ultimate favorite locations to go to.
It is mine as well.
Oh, it's
I
beautiful.
definitely share the sentiment. I can tell you that.
Fantastic.
So before I let you go, Bill, quick line in that round. So a couple of questions, answer as quickly and candidly as you can. So most overrated thing in hospitality right now, in hospitality technology.
Overrated. I think, the dot coms. I think I mean, you don't necessarily need to book on the dot coms. I think that you'll get better deals if you book direct with the brand or with, an independent. I think they're overrated. I mean, you're not getting anything better, and it's if you wanna change your reservation, it's very hard to do it. And for those that are operators, if you're repeat customers, and if you're not tracking this, if your repeat customers are coming back on the dot coms, you're not doing a very good job of marketing back to them. Because all you're
Wow,
doing is paying 15, 20% more for them to come back to you again when you should have been able to get them to come back to you directly.
it's gold. That's a great one. So tell me what's the one system your operation could not run without?
System wise, electronic
System platforms. Yeah.
platforms. Yeah, I'd say it's Maestro, which is our property management system. We're a condo hotel where each of the units are individually owned. So, everything that happens in that unit has to be able to be charged, and then you're splitting the room rate with the owner of the unit. So that system without it it'd be detrimental for us.
Makes sense. Tell me what's the best hospitality experience you've had as a guest and what made it stand out for you?
Best experience as a guest. I gotta go with staying at Air and Owl. We were there number of years ago when the volcano was erupting. We stayed at the observatory and be able to see the lava come down and then experience just the environment around and the hot springs. I think the service that we got at the observatory and the resort, Tabacon, was top notch. I really enjoyed that, and it's gone back, I think, 3 times, and I have kids that are, you know, 30 and 25, and I have 12 and 10. I've taken
Wow,
both sets to both to there because we just enjoyed it so much.
I love it. Nature and good service are definitely two qualifiers you can use for experiences here. Then, Bill, let me ask you this one: what do great operators in your mind do that the average ones don't do?
I'm gonna give you a quote, and I've met him, from Richard Branson. "Train people well enough so they can leave. Treat them well enough so they don't want to. Take care of your employees."
Perfect. One last question. If you were not in hospitality now, which is hard for me to imagine just based on this conversation, but if you weren't, what would you be doing?
I'd be so my hobby, you can see in the background, I'd be welding and building cars. I like to restore old things. I'm a fanatic with old cars. I have an old 1940s candy machine that's outside my office. For my employees, my deal is if you come, the candy's free, and but you got to talk to me. So I find out, what's going on, what's working. But I love to restore old stuff. So
Very cool.
that's would be
Very,
my hobby.
very cool hobby to have for sure. So, Bill, this was a great conversation. I loved how passionate you come across about hospitality, both the resilience of dealing with the impact of things that are beyond your control, but also how passionate you are about caring for guests' experiences and employee experiences. So thank you for making time to be on the show, and thank you for listening to Deep Current, everybody. Bill, where can people follow what you're doing, and where can they learn more about the Pink Shell and the Boykin Management?
Yeah, please just go to www.pinkshell.com, or our Facebook page, which is a lot of fun to watch. We have naturalists that are here. That's why I love Costa Rica. But we have naturalists that are teaching guests about sea turtles and different activities, kayak tours, the manatees, the dolphins. Please just pinkshell.com. We have webcams right on the ospreys, on the birds. You can see the nesting live. We really, one of our core values is obviously encompassing the environment. And if you want to learn more, please go to pinkshell.com.
Thank you, Bill. And thanks for tuning into Deep Current. If you're an operator in hospitality dealing with any of the challenges that Bill discussed today, find us at oceansco.com. We'll be happy to continue that conversation. And until next time, everybody.